Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's community event. My name's Stephen, and I'm here with
Huma, hello everybody. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Huma. How are you today?
Oh, I'm all right. Thank you. What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. So today, everyone, welcome to our community members in Facebook, but also everybody watching on YouTube as well. Today, we're going to be talking about. We're going to be focusing on the classroom management for primary course, and looking in particular at mixed ability classrooms and dealing with mixed ability classrooms in primary. Um, so this is quite common thing, isn't it, Huma? So,
Oh, yes.
hmm. What do you think? I mean, if we kind of look at this topic, what do you think are the kind of common learner differences in the classroom? And obviously, sorry to mention this, but obviously, if anyone has any comments or questions about this topic to do with primary classrooms, please write them in the comments section, and we'd be happy to respond to your questions. So sorry, Huma, to get back to the question.
Not at all.
um,
It's okay, Stephen.
what do you think are the kind of main common differences in the primary classroom?
Okay, Stephen, actually, I was thinking about this morning, and
Mm,
when we say mixed ability, we often, as teachers, we think about academic levels,
mm,
don't we? But I think in primary classrooms, especially, this can be something which is much broader and also maybe a little bit complex too, because
mm,
students can differ, in many different ways. For example, they could differ by motivation. I mean, there are learners who love English because they watch cartoons in English, for example, my son. But then there are those who are learning the language because they have to, because part
mm.
of the school curriculum. Also, there are different learning preferences. There are those who need visuals, and then some who need movement. There are those who need some quiet time. So I think there are many, differences that are there in our classrooms, especially primary classrooms. So I think it's a very complex space for teachers, to visualize and capture. What do you think, Stephen? What can you think of?
Well, I mean, there's the kind of basic differences, but
Mm.
I think one thing that you mentioned there was age, which is a very common issue because you get those kids
Yeah.
that kind of are at the end of the year, and you get those
Mm.
kids who. So you get kid. Well, where I live, the kids that are born in January are a lot bigger and sometimes a lot more mature than the kids that are
Of
born in
course.
December,
Yeah.
and that kind of difference can provide kind of quite a lot of problems in terms of things like
Mm.
concentration and in terms of kind of their ability, their readiness
Yeah.
for learning things and taking things on. Um, so yeah, I think another thing that I mean, there's obviously linguistic competence. I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
where you live, obviously there's lots of different languages.
Yeah.
So they have different exposure to the language. Um, I mean, a kind of classic difference, I think, is the is you mentioned, for example, learning preferences, and I think
Mm.
one thing that's kind of important or something that comes up quite a lot is kids don't like to sit down. Like
Oh.
they will move around, they will do a task,
Yes.
and just as a kind of personal thing, my daughter likes to get tasks done as fast as possible. So if she's given something by the teacher, she wants to get it done and then she can move on and do something else. And you do have kids like that, and then you've
Yes.
got kids that will kind of take a lot more time um, over a task because they need to think, they need maybe quiet time, like you said. So,
Mm.
um,
Yeah, I think, I don't know, Stephen. I think one thing as teachers we have to remember is, I mean, just to summarize what we've been talking about,
mm,
I think our learners, when they come to class, they bring their languages, their cultures, their stories, the different stories, their life stories. I also feel they bring their families, and their communities too. So
mm,
I think as a teacher, we need to take time to learn who they are, and
Hmm.
where they belong, so they can see themselves in the classroom through the lesson activities, through the materials. If they can recognize themselves, in what's happening in the classroom, then I think they're able to, uh, it increases their motivation
Hmm.
naturally, and it's easier to engage learners, which is quite a task, especially in primary classrooms.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Although I mean, this might be slightly off topic, but I've noticed recently sometimes things that I think are not motivating can be very
Mm,
motivating for kids.
yes.
Like, for example, one thing that I was always taught about teaching English is you're not meant to get kids to speak aloud, like read aloud.
Mm,
But some kids can actually really enjoy that
yeah,
because it
yeah.
helps them with pronunciation. It helps them to kind of, especially if it's a story that they're interested in. Um, and that's, yeah, it's something that I hadn't necessarily thought of. And it's kind of interesting watching your children get interested in things that you think, oh, why is she interested in that, or why is he interested in that? So yeah, um,
Yeah, I agree, because sometimes, especially this age group, I think they like to showcase what they are good at. So
mm,
if they are able to read aloud well, then I might as well let everybody know that I can do it.
exactly. And there's that kind of interest in the world around them and things. So yeah. Okay, so I can see we've got some people from different places. So we've got
Oh
some people
yes.
from Brazil, from Sri
Hmm.
Lanka, Ghana, Mauritius, Nigeria. Thank you all for coming. It's nice to have you here. As we mentioned, we're discussing kind of mixed ability in the primary classroom today, and we touched on some kind of key differences that our learners have. Um, so if we're looking at some of those differences um, and the kind of mixed abilities, what kind of ways can we kind of cater for those mixed abilities? Do you think?
Okay, Stephen, before we answer
Oh
that
yeah,
question,
sure.
there are some comments in the chat that I think we
Okay.
should, talk about.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
One,
go ahead.
yes, one of the viewers is saying some learners are slow and some are fast, and
Mm,
there are those who are introvert, and then there are extroverts too. So she's talking about the learner differences that we were discussing a moment ago.
yeah.
Um, and then there's another comment that says there are different perspectives, so learners understand concepts differently. Oh, and there's a
Mm.
nice one about sensory and cognitive differences.
Oh,
Well, that's
okay.
something, we didn't talk about, Stephen.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Obviously,
Yeah.
learners respond in different ways to
Mm,
to different kind of, and it's good to include that in our kind of classrooms in terms of kind of differentiating kind of preferences. So when you're doing lessons, you can use realia to introduce
mm.
something, or you can use images to use something. I was telling you the other day, actually, wasn't I,
Oh,
Bridget,
yes. Yeah,
about
yeah.
using sense, smell.
Mm.
Um, like I did a class where the students, I put food in little bowls, put cover
Ooh.
over the top, and then put holes in the cover, and the learners had to smell the food and guess what the food was. And then after that, we kind of introduced ways of describing food, um, which was obviously, it's nice to do something different like that if you can.
Oh, that's lovely, Stephen. I mean, a very good example of a multisensory activity, where, the different senses are engaged. I think that's a nice segue, for
Hmm.
our next question, how can we actually differentiate learning in the
Hmm.
primary classroom? So, and let's go back to that question, Stephen. I think there are so many different ways of doing this, because, for example, if you look at our managing learners and resources course, module 2 talks about differentiation by task, support, resource, and there are other ways of differentiating learning too. So which is your preferred method, Stephen?
I think most of the time, I think about kind of outcome
Mm,
and task when it comes to kind of differentiation. So I was talking with a group of teachers recently about, we were looking at the kind of outcomes of a course book, like a unit in a course book, and the kind of outcome was a review. It was for secondary
mm,
rather than primary, But we kind of looked at, okay, well, what's the different ways that they could do a review? So they could do it as a kind of a spoken review. They could do it as a written review. They could
Mm,
obviously change the content of the review. So it didn't have to be about a restaurant. It could be about a movie or some
mm.
music or something like that. And that's something that I try to think about, because obviously students are not always interested in the same things.
Yes.
So that's kind of important. I mean, how about you, Huma?
Okay, yes, I mean, I agree with you, Stephen. I mean, thinking
Mhm.
about the task and the outcome. So I try my best to give my learners choices where possible.
Mhm.
And if you have teachers here who work with large classes, I know it might be difficult to give choices all the time when you
Yeah.
have a curriculum, that you're working with and you have limited lesson time. But there are some ways you can tweak, your lesson
Mm.
activities. So I have an example here,
Okay.
Stephen, an example of a choice board. Is that visible, Stephen?
I can see the top two, but you can lift
Ah,
it up in a
okay.
second, maybe.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. Yes. So as you can see, the choice board is about talking about your favorite room in the house. So there are four activities here. One, students could draw, obviously. They
Hmm.
could draw their favorite room and maybe label, objects in that room in their language and in English. They could
Hmm.
even write about it, write two, three sentences, and you can give some language support. They could use there is, there are, if they could. And then of course, the last two are build it and also say it. So for example, you could give students Lego or other blocks, and they could build their favorite room and again label the different objects. And saying it, they could just talk about it, and maybe use some words from the lesson to talk about their favorite room. So I think it's possible to give choices to our learners. Now, if this is for teachers, you don't have to make a choice board like this. This is just, for visual
Hmm.
display for this event. But this could just go up on the board in your classroom. So if you're working with limited resources, it could go up on the board, on the right hand corner somewhere on the board, where you tell your learners. Well, so you could choose one thing that you'd like to do at the end of the lesson. So there are different ways, because I think this is not only differentiating by task but also by outcome, because the outcomes are all going to be different, but it's the same aim. So basically same aim but different access points for students. So that's something that I try to do as much as I can in my classroom.
No, and I think that's a really good idea, because sometimes, I mean, normally, what can happen is as learners make their way through primary, obviously
Mm,
you've got learners that take everything on and they keep it and they retain it, whereas others don't.
yeah.
And you need to make sure that they're still able to achieve in a certain way.
Yes.
Um, so I've done a similar thing to that, with it's a kind of choice worksheet where you have
Mm,
like A, B, C, D, and the students can choose, and it can be like, because a kind of bread and butter activity that you do with students is something like a gap fill or something like that.
yes.
But obviously, you can alter the the
The
task,
support. Yeah.
exactly the support. So, for example, you could do it like a standard gap fill where you
Mm,
have the word in bracket. Maybe they have to change it to a past simple or something like that. Then the next one actually just gives them the answers and they have to
mm,
circle the correct one. So it would be maybe like went, go, goed, and they have to choose the correct one.
yeah.
So that makes it slightly easier. And then maybe the slightly harder one that you could do is maybe if the topic is like a holiday or something, you could say describe the last holiday you went
Yeah.
on, include where you went, who you went with. So you could give that as a kind of very tough thing to do for the kind of higher level students. But that gives a kind of like a choice. And I think if you put that on one worksheet, then the students basically circle the one that they want to do and then they do it. And then maybe what's built into that worksheet is then kind of fast finisher tasks. So let's say you've got a lower level student who's not so
Mm,
confident, they just want to circle the answers. Then you can say, okay, so now try the higher level task. And you can,
yes.
because they could even copy the sentences that they've already chosen and written. Um, so that's a nice way to kind of differentiate. And also, like, you might have, I mean, we talk about mixed ability sometimes as if it's a set thing. Like we have our
Mm,
high achievers in the classroom and we have our low achievers, and I don't think that's necessarily fair.
yeah.
And it's also not kind of responding to primary learners on the day, because primary learners, their emotions go up and down, they change how they feel. Maybe one
Yeah.
day they're tired, one day they really want to challenge themselves.
Yes, very fluid. Yes.
So if you've got a kind of a like your thing with the choice, they can choose maybe to do something difficult. Maybe they want to challenge themselves. A learner that you
Mm,
think is a low achiever may want to challenge themselves and do something harder. Or
yes.
maybe a high achiever is just feeling tired and they just think, I just want to circle the answers today. So
Exactly. It's not a good day for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think that's something that's important with your design of that activity, is that it's not just a set thing. It's flexible.
Yeah, I really like the point that you made about, learner differences there, Stephen, because it's true. Because as teachers, sometimes, we stereotype learners, don't we? So we think, fast finishers are always going to be fast finishers, and
Mhm.
those who struggle will always struggle with something in the classroom. But that's not true at all, because it's not as easy as that. It's pretty complex, because learner differences and their needs, they differ with lessons, because of their exposure to this concept, their prior learning experiences, their exposure to the target language. And like you said, it could be just they're not having a great day. So I think you're right. I think we have to, we should not be boxing our students up, so take one day at a time and see
Mhm.
what learners want to do and how they want to work with the different learning, activities in the classroom.
Yeah, there's a similar comment from
Yes.
one of our community members actually saying about language teachers should prepare the same lesson with different levels. So the first,
Yeah.
she's used an example of maybe like a character in a story. So the first level is to identify the character. The second level is to describe the character, and the third level is to analyze the character traits with evidence, which is really, really nice. That's a really kind of simple activity. And there's something similar that I've done before, which actually I've used the same topic as you, in terms of like a must, should, could activity where the learners, so they have furniture. So the must is that they have to include furniture. The should is they have to say where the furniture is. For example, if they're
Okay.
describing their bedroom, and then the could is to kind of use adjectives, or I mean, maybe
Mm,
adjectives is a bit difficult for primary, so you could just say use colours to describe the
yeah.
furniture. And I've done this before with, for example, like picture dictionaries. So when you introduce vocabulary, maybe you've done some furniture vocabulary, and then they make a little kind of dictionary. So they would draw maybe a bed, and they
Mm,
could write a sentence. So that you would give them sentence starters like "this is a," and then they would just write bed. But then you could give a second sentence, it is, and then they can describe it, it is blue or something like that. So it's a very kind of simple way of describing it. But obviously, the must is they have to use the furniture word, this is a bed.
yes.
The should is, it is next to my, I don't know, TV. um, and then the could is, it is blue or something like that. So you've got those different stages.
Yeah, that's a very good idea, Stephen. And that reminds me of a comment that we earlier had from one of our
Okay.
community members, and
Mhm.
and they suggested something similar, basically having a baseline activity that all learners are able to complete, the must
Mm.
activity that you just described. And then you add optional challenges on top. So then students can, choose, what they'd like to do. So I think that's a great idea.
Mhm. There's actually another comment, which is something
Mm,
we haven't talked about yet, Uma, and
yeah.
from one of the community members saying that group work and
Yes.
mingling are my teaching strategies to differentiate in the classroom. So obviously we've talked about task and
Yes.
outcome, but you can obviously cater to different mixed abilities with the setup of the activity and the interaction. Do you ever have more than one interaction going on in the classroom?
Yeah, of course, yes. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, Stephen, I work in a highly diverse, multicultural and
Mhm.
multilingual setup. So sometimes I have, mixed ability groups, same, ability groups, but I also have peer translanguaging groups, which means I
Mm.
put learners who share languages together,
Oh,
if
okay.
it's a difficult task or maybe they
Mhm.
have to make a poster. So I put learners who share, the same language together, where they have to brainstorm ideas, where possible, before they regroup and work with somebody else who with a different language, so they can then use English for mediation. So they first
Mm.
use their languages for mediation, and then they regroup and use English for mediation with someone they don't have a common language with. So that's another thing that works very well in my class, because I work in a very diverse multilingual setup, so peer translanguaging groups. So you can teachers can also use languages for differentiating the support they provide their learners.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that, I mean, I think teachers probably differentiate without kind of realizing it in terms of the way
Mm,
they interact with the learners. And like you said, so maybe some learners need a bit more language support, maybe using
yes.
their home language, whereas others you can just try and push them using English. So it can kind of, you've got that kind of differentiation in terms of interaction with the
Yeah.
learners as well. Um, and that, yeah, I think there's another comment about kind of scaffolding,
Oh yeah.
and that comes back to the instructions as well. And that's another way that you can differentiate. Is in, you mentioned earlier, I think, Huma, about like support, the way that
Yeah.
we kind of support mixed ability learners. So, are there any particular ways that you kind of scaffold tasks or give support to tasks in mixed
Oh,
ability
yes. I
classes?
mean, for example, this comment mentions instructions. I think giving instructions effectively is an important skill, and
Mm,
something that so many of us,
mhm,
have struggled with, or still struggle with.
yeah.
So I usually try to make my instructions multisensory and
Mm,
multimodal, Stephen. So, for example, I use my voice, obviously, and
mhm,
also, include icons or pictures on the board along with listing the instructions on the board, because we have to respond to the diverse needs in the class. There are students who might have partial hearing impairment, or
mhm,
maybe visual impairment. So those are also needs that we have to respond to. So I think using multisensory instructions is useful. And I think this is not just about giving instructions, it's also about the way you design your lesson activities. Now, a common myth that teachers hold is, oh my God, differentiation is a very time consuming activity, because they imagine in their head, I have to make 25 different worksheets for
mhm,
25 different learners in
mhm,
my class. I would say, please, please don't be so cruel to yourself. Please don't torture yourself. Because I think I've said this before, that differentiation and inclusion, I think they live and thrive well in small adjustments, small tweaks. So I think teachers have to make small design choices so they are
mhm,
sustainable
mhm,
and
mhm,
successful. So, like we were saying earlier, you might have a worksheet for your learners, so maybe it's a reading task, it's the same reading task, but maybe you might include some visual prompts for some learners. Maybe they might want to see what's
mhm,
going on in
mhm,
the text, if possible. For some learners, you might, you could also have maybe a bilingual word bank, if possible, so you could include a bilingual word bank. Or if they have access to devices, they could use their own devices for support.
mhm.
And maybe an extension question at the bottom for those early finishers. So it's the same worksheet, but all you have to do is think of ways of building support, making it flexible. And you don't have to print out different activities. The extras can go up on the board, so it's
Yeah,
possible.
and I think I mean, you mentioned there about like kind of creating 25, 30 different
Exactly.
worksheets, which is obviously quite scary.
Yeah.
But I mean, a kind of simple way that you can do it. I mean, a kind of going back to that kind of classic activity of a kind of gap fill is maybe
Yeah.
a way to different to kind of cater to mixed abilities. You say, okay, you like, again with that kind of fundamental of like must, should, could, is you could say
Yes.
you've got 8 questions. You say everyone, you need to do 3.
Yeah.
If you've got time, you can then do 5. If you've got time, you can then do 8. So you just
Yes.
kind of do it like that. And that's a nice, simple way to use the course books as well, because that's what the course book activities include. Um, and I think as well, like you mentioned, kind of small adjustments. And I think the task
Yeah.
design is, like you said, is really important. But I,
Important. Yeah.
but I think one thing as well is kind of the open-ended tasks where people can achieve in different ways. So,
Mm.
so for example, one thing that I do quite a lot is kind of like board races with primary students where they have to go to the board, maybe they have to write a word. So, like, let's say you're doing food as an example. Maybe you divide the board into 4 teams and they're in rows. The student at the front has to go to the board and write a food word. but you can obviously have mixed abilities in that they can write the word, they can draw the word. They don't
Oh, yes.
necessarily have to write it in English. They could write it
Mm,
just because it still provides with the opportunity, because that's a learning opportunity, isn't it? Even if they draw a picture or they write it in their home language, you can then recast it. Like,
scaffold. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, and then that helps them learn a new word. And then once you've got all that language up on the board, then you have like, um, I don't know, it could be like a STEM sentence or a question like, which food do you eat for breakfast, for dinner, for lunch? And
Mm,
then they can ask and answer that, and then they could do all the um, you could do the instructions like you said, and kind of, I think one thing that's really super important with instructions is obviously demonstrating what
yes.
you're going to do, because primary learners, they they don't have necessarily the best working memories. If you're going to
Yeah.
tell them to do something, it needs to be short, it needs to be sweet, it needs to be really clear. And that's where the demonstration comes in, because if a primary student sees how to do a task, they're more likely to be able to achieve it, than you just saying, okay, you need to do this.
Mm. Yeah, I think you brought out a very good point about learner attention here, Stephen, because primary learners have very short attention span. So I think the activities have to be short too. I think that's also responding to mixed different abilities in the classroom, because
Mm,
we might have learners with diverse needs. So which means that there might be some who need support with self-regulation. So in that case, we need those short activities and, frequent breaks so those learners can regulate their emotions and maybe their physical self. So I think that's important too. That also reminds me of the classroom space. I think we can also
mm,
differentiate the way we use classroom space. For instance, you could have a quiet corner, a sensory corner for learners who need some quiet time to bring themselves together, to self-regulate again. And they could also bring their favorite sensory object from home that they could use whenever they want to.
mhm.
You could also have a challenge zone for, those advanced students or early finishers, with some activities that they could always, go to and maybe do, if they are done with everything else, on the sheet that you've asked them to do. So the challenge zone, you could have that as well. You could also have, a help zone where students
Mhm.
can, go to for extra support on maybe,
Mm.
other scaffolding activities. So I think teachers can also think about, if possible, the way they use their classroom space. So I think when it's visible to learners that you're willing to provide support, I think they'll be more willing to open up, and
Yeah,
participate in the classroom.
yeah. I think something that's kind of related to that is I've done kind of viral feedback before, where
Mm.
one learner finishes the task and they then go and help another learner. And when that learner finishes, that learner then goes and helps another learner, and it kind of passes around the class, so that they end up supporting each other.
That's lovely, Stephen. That's a
Mm.
very good idea. I think this, I mean, so the helpers as well as those
Mm.
receiving help, are able to actually process the information. So it's there's a dual purpose here. It helps
Mhm.
both the helper, and the one who's, receiving the help. So, yes.
Yeah, and they get, and I think that even if it's a kind of a student that usually takes a little bit more time, if they've had the
Mm.
support and then they finish it, then they can get confidence about going to help somebody else, which is a nice thing. Um,
Yeah, I think that improves the classroom culture and makes it
mhm,
more, inclusive for everybody.
yeah, definitely.
Oh, we got
Um,
some nice comments here, Stephen.
yeah, there's one about. I mean, this is a good point about kind of when activities are pitched above some levels, and
Yes.
people can feel frustrated and discouraged. And if it's too easy, then they lose interest.
Yeah.
So having kind of like the option thing that you mentioned before, I think that's a really nice way of doing that and managing that frustration. Um, but I think,
There's
yeah,
another
go ahead.
comment too,
Yeah.
Stephen, about, having patience in a mixed
Mhm.
ability classroom, because not all our students are, at the same level. So I think this is a very nice comment, and it says every student comes into classroom with different strengths, weaknesses, learning preferences, and experiences. So as teachers, we need to understand, take time to respond to these differences. And there's something that I'd like to say here. I think it's an experiment that teachers do every day. So we have to be even kind to ourselves, because we cannot expect results over time. It's a process and it takes time. So it's okay to fail, but it's important to
Mhm.
learn, from that experience and to move on. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, if you'd like to find out more about this, everybody, in this kind of topic, Huma mentioned the Managing Learners and Resources course that's running at the moment, and that's definitely relevant to this. Also, the Classroom Management
Imagine.
in Primary course.
Yeah.
So, you can go to both of those courses, and they have a focus on this topic, and there's a workbook in there that will have extra resources that you can use, and extra kind of teaching ideas and tips.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Yes, I think it was a very good conversation. I mean,
Mm,
we were able to talk about different types of differentiation. So we'd like
mm,
to thank everybody for joining us today, and making this uh, conversation more useful and inspiring. We got a quick announcement. We got a
mhm,
special event lined up for you next week. So there's the International Mother Languages Day next week on the 21st of February. So we got a special event for you on Thursday. It's called Ask Us Anything About Teaching Multilingual Classrooms. It's special for two reasons. One, we are celebrating the International Mother Languages Day. And two, we also have a special guest for the event. It's Justin Sass. She's from UNESCO, and she'll be joining us and will be talking to us about multilingual classrooms and multilingual education. So we'd like to invite all of you to come along to this conversation and help us make this event successful. So thank you very much for coming today. It was a pleasure having all of you here with us today. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Philippa, for working your magic in the background,
mhm.
as
And thank you,
always.
Huma, as well, for all your ideas.
Thanks to you too, Stephen. We'll see everybody again next week, and also
Yes.
online in the community discussions. So
Mhm.
let's continue this conversation online. So please keep commenting and add your ideas and questions. You take care. Have a good day, and bye bye.
Bye bye, everyone.
How to share our YouTube videos and playlists. If using a shared device, check the menu at the bottom of your screen to make sure it's logged into your account. When sure you're in the right account, select Search from the top menu. Search for the British Council Teaching English channel and select it. Look down the page for British Council Teaching English, then select it. This is our channel where we share videos for teachers. Tap on Videos to see individual videos. Here you can explore our many videos for teachers. Or choose Playlists to see selections of our videos grouped by a common theme. Tap on a playlist to learn more about it. Watch the videos. Or share the playlist. From here you can share the playlist through your other apps. Or copy the link and paste it into a message. It's just as easy to share an individual video. Hold your phone upright and tap on a video to play it. Then use the share button under the video. From here you can share the video through your other apps. Or copy the link and paste it into a message.